war is probably the most brutal thing human beings have ever invented. It takes ordinary people, farmers, teachers, fathers, sons, and puts them in a situation where their job is to kill other ordinary people they've never met. It strips everything back. It turns neighbors into enemies. It turns fields into graves. But every now and then, in the middle of all of that, something unexpected happens. A moment where two people on opposite sides of a war look at each other and see not an enemy, but a human being. Today, I want to tell you 3 of those moments. 3 true stories from 3 different wars. And I think by the end, you'll be asking yourself the same question I did. What does it say about us that even in our worst moments, we're still capable of this? December 1914. The First World War has been going for less than 6 months. And already, it's nothing like anyone expected. The generals had promised it would be over by Christmas. A quick, clean war. A matter of weeks, maybe months. Instead, hundreds of thousands of men are buried in trenches across Belgium and northern France. 2 lines of mud-filled ditches stretching from the English Channel all the way to the Swiss border, nearly 700 kilometers of front line. The space between the 2 lines is called no man's land. A few dozen meters of open ground littered with barbed wire, and the bodies of men who tried to cross it. Anyone who stepped into no man's land in daylight was shot. The trenches themselves are miserable beyond description. Knee-deep mud. Rats everywhere. Cold that doesn't let go. And just a few meters away, on the other side, the enemy, close enough to hear them cough. The British and German soldiers had been staring at each other across that same mud for months. Shooting at each other. Watching each other die. And then Christmas Eve arrived. It started quietly. Small things. German soldiers began placing small candles along the edges of their trenches. Christmas trees, tiny ones, cut from nearby forests, appeared along the German parapet. And then, drifting across no man's land in the cold winter air, came something completely unexpected. Singing. The Germans were singing Christmas carols. Still Nacht. Silent Night. The British soldiers stopped and listened. Some of them recognized the melody even without knowing the German words. Others leaned out of their trenches to hear better, half expecting a trick. But it wasn't a trick. And then something happened that no commanding officer had ordered, no military strategy had planned, and no one at headquarters would have approved. A German soldier climbed out of his trench, unarmed, and walked toward the British line. And the British soldiers didn't shoot. Within hours, along stretches of the front line, men who had been trying to kill each other for months were standing together in no man's land. Shaking hands. Sharing cigarettes. Chocolate. Buttons from their uniforms as souvenirs. They showed each other photographs of their families back home. One German soldier produced a small harmonica. Someone else started singing again. And then, this is the part that's almost impossible to believe, someone produced a football. And they played. Germans and British together, in the mud of no man's land, between the trenches, on Christmas Day 1914. Historians debate exactly how many games were played and where. But the accounts from soldiers' letters and diaries confirm it beyond doubt. It happened. In multiple locations along the front. One British soldier wrote home to his mother. Just you think, that only a week ago we were shooting at them, and now we are playing football together. A German officer later recalled standing and talking to a British soldier for nearly an hour, in broken French since either spoke the other's language, about their families, about home, about how much they both missed it. Neither man mentioned the war. By December 26th, the officers had ordered the men back to their positions. The ceasefire was unofficial, unauthorized, and technically illegal under military law on both sides. The high command on both sides was furious. And so they went back. Back to the trenches. Back to the mud. Back to shooting at each other. But something had changed. At least for a few hours, they had looked across no man's land and seen not an enemy. A person. Someone who was cold and scared and homesick, exactly like they were. The Christmas Truce of 1914 never happened on the same scale again. The war went on for 4 more years and killed another 16 million people. But for one night and one day, across a few kilometers of Belgian mud, the war simply stopped. Because 2 groups of human beings decided, without anyone ordering them to, that tonight they were done. December 20th, 1943. World War II. Somewhere over Germany at 27,000 feet. A Boeing B-17 bomber called Ye Old Pub is in serious trouble. The plane and its 10-man American crew had just completed a bombing raid over the German city of Bremen. On the way back, they were hit hard. One engine was destroyed. A second was damaged. The nose of the plane had been almost completely blown off, the plexiglass shattered, leaving the front of the aircraft open to freezing air at -60 degrees Celsius. The hydraulics were gone. The oxygen system was failing. Most of the guns were frozen and useless. The pilot, 21-year-old Lieutenant Charlie Brown from West Virginia, was somehow keeping the plane in the air. But barely. They were flying far too slowly, far too low, and falling steadily behind the rest of the formation. A lone, crippled bomber flying slowly over Germany was not expected to survive long. And sure enough, it didn't take long. A German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter appeared off the left wing. The pilot was Franz Stigler, 27 years old. An experienced Luftwaffe ace with 27 confirmed kills. He needed just one more kill to earn the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest military honor. And in front of him was exactly what he needed. A crippled bomber that could barely fly. It should have taken him seconds. He pulled into attack position. And then he flew in close enough to look directly into the cockpit of the B-17. And what he saw stopped him. He could see inside the plane. The tail gunner was slumped over, unmoving, dead or unconscious. He could see wounded men. He could see the shattered nose, the freezing interior, the desperate state of the crew. He later recalled the moment clearly. He had been trained by a commanding officer who told him, "You don't shoot at a man in a parachute. You don't shoot someone who's already down." In that moment, looking at that broken plane and its crew, Franz Stigler made a decision that could have gotten him executed. He did not fire. Instead, he pulled his fighter up alongside the B-17 and flew next to it. Wing to wing. Enemy to enemy. Charlie Brown looked out the side window and saw a German fighter pilot, close enough to make eye contact, and braced for the kill shot. It didn't come. Stigler gestured. He pointed toward England. He pointed again. Fly that way. Go home. Then he did something even more extraordinary. He escorted the damaged bomber. He flew alongside it, in formation, protecting it from other German fighters and anti-aircraft guns that would have shot it down, all the way to the North Sea. At the coast, where British fighters could pick up the escort, Stigler looked across at Brown, gave a salute, a genuine military salute, and turned back toward Germany. He told no one what he had done. To report it would have been a court-martial. Possibly a firing squad. The B-17 made it back to England. The crew landed safely. 6 of the 10 men were wounded. 1 was dead. Charlie Brown filed his report. He mentioned the German fighter that had appeared and then escorted them, but no one believed him. It was dismissed as confusion from the stress of combat. Both men went on with the war. Both survived. And then, for 46 years, they had no idea the other was still alive. In 1990, Charlie Brown decided to try to find the German pilot who had spared his life. He placed an ad in a newsletter for former Luftwaffe pilots, describing the incident. Franz Stigler read it and recognized it immediately. They spoke on the phone for the first time in 1990, 47 years after that day over Germany. Stigler later said, "I didn't want to kill you. I was a fighter pilot, not a murderer." Brown said he had thought about that German pilot almost every day for 47 years. The two men became close friends. They attended air shows together, gave talks together, stayed in each other's homes. They were brothers, they said. Brothers from different sides of the same war. Both men died in 2008, within months of each other. February 1945. Iwo Jima. A small volcanic island in the Pacific Ocean, barely 8 square miles. And the site of one of the deadliest, most brutal battles of the entire Second World War. The island was heavily fortified by Japanese forces who had spent months tunneling 17 kilometers of underground passages into the volcanic rock. Nearly 22,000 Japanese soldiers were dug in. The American assault began on February 19th. Over the following 5 weeks, the fighting would be unlike almost anything seen elsewhere in the war. Close range, often hand-to-hand, in ash and sulfur and heat. By the end, nearly 7,000 American Marines were dead. Of the 22,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 survived. It was a battle defined by total commitment on both sides. No mercy asked, none given. And yet, in the letters, diaries, and later testimonies of soldiers who fought on Iwo Jima, certain moments appear again and again. Small moments. Quiet moments. Moments that have no place in the official military history of the battle. A Marine reaching a wounded Japanese soldier pinned beneath rubble. The Japanese soldier expected to be shot. Instead, the Marine gave him water from his own canteen, called for a medic, and sat with him until help came. A Japanese soldier, himself wounded, who guided an injured American away from a firefight and towards safety before slipping back into the rocks. These moments were rare. They were exceptions, not the rule. The Battle of Iwo Jima was savage and the losses on both sides were devastating. But they happened. And the men who were there remembered them. One Marine, interviewed decades later, described the moment he gave water to a Japanese soldier who was dying. "He looked at me," the Marine said, "and I looked at him. And for a second, there was no war. There was just two guys. One of them was dying and one of them had water. I don't know why I did it," he added. "I just did it." That's the thing about these moments. They're not calculated. They're not strategic. They don't help you win the battle. They just happen. Because somewhere underneath the uniform and the training and the fear and the hatred that war manufactures, there's still a person. And sometimes that person surfaces at the strangest moments. In the middle of no man's land on Christmas Eve. In the cockpit of a fighter plane over Germany. In the ash and sulfur of a volcanic island in the Pacific. And for a few seconds, it doesn't matter whose side you're on. 3 stories. 3 wars. 3 moments where someone chose something different. Not because they were ordered to. Not because it was safe. Not because it made any strategic sense. But because they looked at another human being and couldn't do otherwise. I think about that a lot. About what it takes to hold on to your humanity in a situation specifically designed to take it from you. About the fact that Franz Stigler risked execution to spare a crew he never met. That British and German soldiers played football in a field where men had been dying for months. That a Marine on Iwo Jima held a dying enemy's hand and gave him water. None of these stories changed the outcome of the wars they happened in. None of them saved millions of lives or ended conflicts. But they remind us of something important. That even in our worst moments, Even when everything around us is designed to make us forget, we're still capable of this. Of seeing each other. Of choosing each other. What do you think? Is there a story like this you know about? Something that happened in a war that shouldn't have been possible? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to read them.